everyone. Thank you so much for joining this program. And I'm not even going to bother introducing myself since Sarah already did everything. So thank you for that, Sarah. Just a quick few resources that come in handy. So one of them is Facebook. That's the one I've recently been updating more and more. The Facebook Let's Talk College page. This is what it looks like. Then we also have my website, letstalkcollege.org. And if you're interested to receive free information, you can always sign up for the newsletter. No pressure. That's just, again, one more additional resource. All right, let's get into it. So we're going to cover a couple of things. With respect to time, there is a topic I took out, which is just the entire game of college admissions, but I'll still keep referring back to it as we go through these topics. So I kind of weaved it into the whole process. But first, we're going to start with just what are the components? What does it take? What are we supposed to submit? What classes are we supposed to be taking? All of that. The timeline, we're just going to do a quick overview first. The timeline also pops up at the end, so you don't have to memorize it. Also, one more thing. If you are interested in receiving the PDF of this presentation, Sarah will be sending that out at the end. So feel free to screenshot if you'd like to take screenshots, or you can just wait for the PDF. It's completely up to you how you want to take the information in. There is a lot of information coming your way. Do you want to give you a heads up on that? And like Sarah said, it's going to be recorded and posted on the library's YouTube channel, so you can always just go back and refer to that information at a later date. So you have it all available, no pressure in getting everything in down at once. SAT, ACT overview, it's very quick. The whole SAT thing is a different chapter of a presentation of its own, but we're still going to cover bits and pieces, the most relevant ones. How do you find a university that you might be interested in? So the whole process, if you're starting from scratch, what do you do? And finally, I hate leaving a presentation with just here's a bunch of information. I'd rather give you action steps so that when you walk away from here, you know, you have an exact to-do list basically of what website should be looking on, who do you reach out to, etc. So we're going to talk about actual concrete steps you could take. And conclusion and Q&A, really, that's just a formality. Realistically, after every single topic, I'll be asking for questions. You can, like Sarah said, just post them in the chat at any point, and I will get to them. Okay, let's get started. Components of the college application, its actual application itself, right? So the asterisk is there because this is one of the biggest parts of your entire application, which is your coursework. Why is the biggest and most important part? Well, because you're going to further schooling, right? So if you're going to be going to more schooling, it would be to everyone's benefit if they looked at your performance in your previous schooling. So with that said, your coursework is one of the most important parts. And within this, there are a couple components. So first, let's consider GPA. Now, I know Barlow and a couple high schools just don't give out GPAs, or they do a weird GPA thing. But GPAs in general, there are two different types. There's the weighted GPA and there's the unweighted GPA. So I'm going to start in reverse, unweighted GPA. Unweighted GPA is the one you hear about all the time. The at a 4.0, oh, we have a 3.8 or a 3.9, or it's almost a 4.0, or it is a 4.0. That's the unweighted GPA. Now, the unweighted GPA does not take into account the difficulty level of a certain course. So if you got, let's say, a C in AP Calc, and you got a C in regular calculus, well, it doesn't factor in the fact that AP Calculus suddenly had a lot more, or it had a lot more homework included in it, a lot more content. You move at a faster pace because there's an exam coming up at the end. It doesn't account for any of that. Unweighted GPA just says a C is a C is a C. That's it. And this is the number of points it receives. On the other hand, a weighted GPA is out of 5.0, and that does in fact take into account the difficulty level of a course. So in that case, now getting a C in an AP Calc course, probably better than getting a B or a C in a regular calc course, because the intensity was different, right? So the weighted calculus, it basically factors in the intensity of any course, honors versus regular, advanced versus honors, so on. Unweighted does not care. Now, what particular grades are they going to really take a look at? Your AP classes, if you're taking any, your honors classes, International Baccalaureate, which Barlow does not have that program, but I believe the nearest one up north is in New Haven, and down south is in Stanford, in Greenwich area. So that doesn't concern us. And dual enrollment, so that's a name that has multiple, it's a label that has different names depending on where you go. But ultimately it means that students are taking college classes in high school. So I'm not saying you're taking AP classes, which are college level classes, but rather you're affiliated with the university of some sort and you are receiving college credit for the classes that you take. Now, usually you can talk to your guidance counselor about it. And in some cases, so of course, this is a good time for the lawnmower to start. Please let me know if you can't hear me, just message. And I'm just going to see what I can do with speaking a little bit loudly. And we'll make this work. But okay, so college affiliated classes, dual enrollment. I'll give you an example. In Stanford, West Hill High School is affiliated with the UConn Stanford campus, and some of the math classes that they take them in their high school, but they receive college credit for them if you fill out the paperwork and pay the fee. So it works differently in every area. Now, with that said, class rank is important as well. So with all of this said, a couple of things you need to know. Number one, you will not be docked if, for example, you did not take an IB course or something because your high school does not offer it, right? In Barlow, students are not allowed to take AP classes until junior year. So students will not be docked if someone else's resume said that they took AP classes in sophomore year or freshman year. Why or how? Well, first of all, a university wants to see that you've taken advantage of the opportunities that were actually available to you. If the International Baccalaureate program is not available to you, then that's the limitation from the high school. That's not you. Same thing, AP classes. It's not your fault if you couldn't take an AP class in sophomore year. Okay. It's always like this, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, and how do universities know this? There's every high school, and this is going to be something your guidance counselor does, is they usually submit a 4-page PDF called the school profile, which includes the average GPAs of the school, the average AP classes that students take, what are the AP classes that are offered. So once again, you can't be punished for not taking a course that was never offered. What grades the AP classes are available to, average roughly SAT scores, what kind of universities the students get into. All of that information is basically submitted by the school to every university that a student applies to. So that you don't have to worry about. And also, one more thing with the GPAs, universities calculate or recalculate. Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah. So universities can calculate and recalculate your GPAs. Why? Well, we all tend to take BS classes to bump our GPA up. But universities know that. So what they'll do is they'll take the core classes they need, the core sciences that they asked for. Some say, oh, we need 3 years of a language or 4 years of English or 4 years of a science and whatever. So they'll take all of those classes in and then they'll recalculate your GPA. Couple reasons that happen. One, opportunities that are available to certain students and not to other students. So you want to make it as fair as possible in terms of the other classes that students are allowed to take. Second, every high school, actually not every, majority of high schools calculate their GPAs differently. There's no national criteria. There's no uniform criteria for any of this, which basically means if you go to New Canaan High School, instead of doing the 4.0 or 5.0 scale, they have out of 100. I've had parents tell me, oh, my kid has a 78 or an 85 or an 88. And I have to sit there and think, I have no idea what that means. I get that that's a B, but on a scale of 4.0, which is what we're used to, I have no idea what number you fall into. Now that's just Fairfield County, and that's just 2 different high schools within the same county. Blow that up at a national level, and suddenly you're going to have so many different grading systems, ranking systems that there's no uniformity, right? So for that purpose, universities have to recalculate GPA. SAT, ACT. Now there is the move towards test optional. However, it is always preferred that you submit your SAT or ACT score. Unfortunately, the exams are not going anywhere because it's a $1 billion industry. quite literally, College Board makes $1 billion roughly in revenue from their SAT stuff, from their AP exams, from selling student information to universities. So it's a big, big industry. And to give you further proof it's not going anywhere, in 2024, the SAT is going to change. So anyone who currently has a sophomore and under classmen, you are going to be taking the new SAT, not the current one that exists. It's roughly every 8 to 10 years they change the full exam. Last time it changed was 2016, and now we're looking at 2024. Or yes, 2024. ACT is also planning a change. They've been very vague about the details, primarily because they were planning changes before COVID, and then COVID hit, and then they kept postponing and saying, okay, well, we're going to do it next year. And then COVID was still around. Then we're going to do it again next year. And then COVID was still around. And finally, they just said it's on hold indefinitely. But they were ready for the changes. So just keep in mind that probably around 2024, they will both be rolling around changes. We have another slide on SAT, ACT, so I'll cover that in a bit. Other stuff. Personal. So after we've done the coursework, we looked at the numbers. Now we're going in the personal category. So personals are anything that you've done outside of the classroom. You have a job. Okay, what did you do? It doesn't have to be this nice, attractive job, because some of my students, when we're working on their college essay that comes up of just, oh, but I was just working at Carluzzi's and it's kind of boring. What do you mean? There's nothing cool to tell. Or I was working at an ice cream shop, or I was working at a camp counselor. It doesn't matter what you did. What matters is how you tell the story. What did you learn from that experience? How did you become more of a, I guess, a wholesome person? Did you learn how to address customers who were pissed at you, just not even at you, but for other reasons, but they just took it out on you? How did you manage that? If it was rush hour, did you screw up the orders? No, you didn't. Well, you work well under pressure, or you learn to work well under pressure, right? So there are lots of benefits that come into play that we don't realize because it just feels natural. So extracurricular activities, like I said, includes the jobs, includes any volunteer work that you do, any clubs, student organizations. If you are helping take care of family members or younger siblings because parents are working and therefore you don't have the time to go outside the house or outside of school to get a job, volunteer, etc., but you're helping inside the house, then that also counts. That does not mean that doing your dishes counts as extracurricular activities. Doing your chores does not count as extracurricular activities. This is just, it's simply if you are genuinely helping the family out and therefore you don't have the time to do anything else. That all counts as extracurricular activity. Then we have the honors and achievements. They care, that could be in the athletics, but also in the academics. So National Honor Society, honor roll. If you have the junior writing portfolio scores that, a 5 or 5.5, or the rare 6 that comes out, that might be something you want to put on your application. Personal statements and supplemental essays. So personal statement is also called the college essay. That's the big one that we all think is the only writing piece you have to do. Anyone who's had an older child go through the writing process, it's not limited just to your college essay. There's also something called supplemental essays. And these guys are mini essays. And they vary by university. Some universities have them, some don't. And the ones that do have them could have 1 question for you with 250 word count, or they can have 3 questions for you or 5 questions for you. There's no uniformity in any of this. It's really take it by university. And of course, if you are applying for the arts or sports, then you have your portfolio, your auditions, your sports, your coaches recruiting, all of that plays into that factors in too. And finally, we have the miscellaneous stuff, the recommendations, the interviews, the demonstrated interest. So we're going to talk more about recommendations and interviews, but the demonstrated interest, I'm just going to address that now. Okay, so this is a very vague category, but here are a couple of factors they consider. Number 1, if you receive emails from universities, did you open them? Actually, a lot of universities track that data. So now they want to know, how interested is this kid in attending our university? Meaning, if accepted, will they actually attend? Will we be getting their tuition money? Or are we going to be wasting a spot and thereby potentially losing money because we have an empty spot? So if we have 3,000 spots to fill, and we didn't pay attention to demonstrated interest, and suddenly we have only, let's say, 2,999. So we have one empty spot. Well, that one empty spot is now costing us whatever we could be earning in tuition, right? So universities only want to accept the students who have shown some kind of interest that they might be attending that university if accepted. So they're protecting their bottom line at the same time. And how do you show some demonstrated interest? So number one, click on mark, select all, mark as read. If you don't want to open up a specific email, that's one of the ways you can do it. Just for that data, the red receipt to send. Another thing, if you are genuinely interested in a university, then be sure to click in the link in the email. So it doesn't matter what they sent you, just click on the link and then you can explore the websites on your own. And I'll show you the points that you should look at when you're looking at a university's website, but just try and make sure you click via the link sent to you on the email. Third, reach out to the marketing reps that come to your high schools, get to know them. And it doesn't mean you have to be the creepy who's like, hey, no, just say, hey, I'm interested. Is there anything I can do to up my, up my chances of making my application look good? Or just say, hi, I'm so and so. Thank you so much for the presentation that you did. I'm really looking forward to applying, etc. Why do you get to know the marketing rep or just even introducing yourself? Because in the off season, actually, so in the off season, they're your marketing reps. So right now, you'll have all these presentations happening at your high school. The seniors are usually the ones that attend. Sometimes juniors do as well. But then what happens is once that application cycle actually starts, so once people start sending these application cycles in, for some of the universities, those marketing reps are also your admissions counselors, right? Because due to the seasonal nature of the work, universities are not going to hire 20 admissions officers when there's not going to be much to do in the months of May, June, July, usually August, September, October. They start getting busy around November. So they wear two hats. So that's another way to do it. Email the admissions officers with questions. And I'll show you, we'll talk more about what kind of questions or just what should you have already looked up as opposed to what kind of questions you can add. But for now, that's it. And parents, you should not be the ones doing any of the reaching out at all. In fact, you do that too often, and you're almost blacklisting your kid because at this point, admissions officers want to see the teenager who's almost an adult taking initiative, right? So if these teens are going to be away from home, they're the ones responsible for their process and their success, and they're supposed to show up in class. Can they also be the ones who take initiative in their own process? That's very, very important to know. Any questions? It should be teenagers asking, not parents. All right. So with that said, let's get to the timeline. Now, at the same timeline, you might have seen it before. COVID effects we've pretty much gone back to how everything was before COVID. So we're back to first 2 years, freshman and sophomore years, it's all about your grades. It's all about finding extracurricular activities. You don't have to commit to anything, but test things out. Basically, you shouldn't be sitting at home or I should say, maybe be busy at least twice a week. I'm not saying overcommit because most of my students are also very sleep deprived. And I'm not an advocate of that. So you don't have to keep yourself crazy busy, but maybe have one activity or two activities, or just test the waters to see what you like. Do you like in the environmental stuff? Do you like the sports? Do you like the Dorothy Day? So making the sandwiches for the homeless, whatever it is, test it out. Then when summer before junior year, so leading up to junior year, this is when you test prep. This is the best time to test prep. You're never going to be as free as you will be here. After that, school takes over, applications will take over in the next summer. So this is the best time if you want to give yourself a good shot. And it's so start testing. I usually have students start maybe about a week or 2 weeks after school ends, depending on how far into the school year, the snow days hit in. But I would say last week of June roughly is a good start time. And then you just keep prepping, practicing, and you take the August SAT. ACT, I would not force you to take the July one. I would do the September one instead. But then what happens is with your takes and retakes, you could be done before the holidays. And that's a big deal because the second semester is when college tours really kick in. It's when, and the midterms, especially for Barlow, happen in January. You think you're going to study for that March SAT, but you're losing. It's a trade-off, right? You're not going to be able to study for the SAT until you get your midterms in properly. So, and that happens mid-January. So already you're not starting until probably the last week of January prepping. And there's February break. A lot of families do college tours in that weekend. And then March, you have your exam. This is towards the end of March because in the state of Connecticut, we have a free SAT for all public school juniors. The state pays for your exam, and that's on a normal school day. So one of the most shitty pieces of advice that we hear often is, oh, it's fine. You can start testing in the spring semester. No. If possible, start in the fall semester, get it done. Spring semester, April hits, you end up with your spring break. A lot of families do college tours then. And like I said, Barlow junior year is the first time you can take AP classes. Well, AP exams are the first 2 weeks of May. Your SAT is the first Saturday of May. So starting roughly end of March all through April, including spring break time, you're going to have conflict for study time. You're going to want to study for your AP exams, but you also have your SAT coming up. You also have college tours happening. There's too much to manage in second semester. So one less thing is better. And that's usually the time I lose a lot of my students in terms of they have to keep rescheduling sessions because they're like, no, I just have so much schoolwork. I have this essay and that essay and this for my AP class. And basically your SAT prep becomes inconsistent. So you could do 5 SAT sessions back to back and see significant improvement, or you could do 5 SAT sessions completely spread out. You're spending the same amount of money, but you're not going to see the results. And that's usually what happens is when parents feel like this was a waste of money, it's when you spend the money in the spring semester. With that said, boot camps, everything, if you want to invest in that, or even Khan Academy, if you want to study, January to March is the best time if you are taking AP classes. After that, it should be basic upkeep. It shouldn't be shoot, I have this 2 hours worth of work 3 times a week or something. You want to balance it out. And then of course in June we have our finals, which again, depending on how many snow days we have, that could be the beginning of June, or the second week of June, and the SAT is the first Saturday of June. So once again, you have conflict for study time, right? With that said, other stuff that should be happening outside of your testing, college discussion, ideally earlier on, the better. And college discussion, so topics to talk about. What kind of location do we want? Do we prefer you stay local, which and local could be Northeast, right? That counts as local. Instead of going to California or instead of going to the other side of the country, can you stay local because if something like COVID happens again? And that's what a lot of families, that's kind of the trend that's been happening is a lot of families say, hey, we want to stay local, closer to family in case something happens, we can pull you out. Then doesn't matter. Talk about that. If you're okay going further away, that's fine. But just know what your options are. Second one is finances. So are we saying, do we want in-state? Do we want out-of-state? Even if it's out-of-state, you could still end up with enough money from scholarships received that it could even be cheaper to go out-of-state than it is to stay in-state. Are we talking academic interest? And we'll cover all of those. We'll cover more into all of this. But main point is the earlier you have the discussion, big school, small school, medium sized. Do you want in the middle of nowhere? Do you want to be in the city? Do you want somewhere in the middle where it's an hour out of the city, but that's good? Do you want a college campus? Do you want the whole atmosphere, the experience, the college atmosphere? Or would you rather be in a city where you don't really have school spirit, but you get the city instead, etc. And then of course, so starting a college search, we'll address that in a bit. Second semester, if you need to retake, that's okay. I recommend retakes in the second semester as opposed to the initial take. So I've had students who maybe they didn't start over the summer, but they started prepping now, and that's fine. Then you start testing, maybe you test in December for the first time. Okay, but you put in so much effort up front to improve on the math that you have issues with, or to improve on the reading strategy, whatever it might be, that you put the effort in, you know what little tweaks and such you have to do, then you have time again to do that for the next one. And by the time you get to May, yes, you might be fighting for your study time, but you kind of have your SAT game or ACT game figured out already, that it's just basic upkeep, which is much more doable than learning the content or making heavy improvements at that point. And again, talk to students in the university. We'll get to all of that in a sec. Okay, now senior year. Here's what everything's gonna look like. And this is the anti-procrastination game. So the way to really limit the stress that's gonna come in, because once again, you're gonna be juggling a lot of different, or students are gonna be juggling a lot of different things. So first step, if let's say you still have your SAT left to do, I almost wouldn't even test in June. Focus on your grades. Like I said before, your grades matter the most. At that point, I might just say, all right, let's test again in August. So just on the testing front, you can test up until the month your application is due. So if you have a November 1st deadline and the SAT is offered November 4th, Saturday, November 4th, let's say, okay, you can take that exam, but you have to, when you register for an exam, there is an option that says for free reports, which means usually you have to pay to send your score reports. It's $12 for it's $12, I believe, or 13 probably. 13 for SAT and ACT per report. But when you first register, you get 4 free ones. Now, in these 4 free ones, if you choose to use this option, the university will find out your score just a couple of days after you find out your score. So it's kind of a risk, right? Because you're finding out maybe it's not the best score. Well, tough luck. Which is why I said preemptively do all your testing as early as possible. So then you can be very selective as to which scores you want universities to see. If your deadlines are in January, then you can just take all the exams you want, see the scores, and then send them. So it really just depends on when the application deadlines are. So that's on the SAT, ACT front. Now, so writing, basically. You want to start your writing over the summer. 98% of your writing, you ideally want it done over the summer. That includes your college essay. That includes most of the supplementals. The topics will come out. The college essay topics usually come out January, February of junior year. So you have a good 8 months or 6 months before your summer, before you even look at them. But those come out way in advance. The supplemental topics tend to come out mid-July. So you first work on your college essay going from, let's say, mid to late June to about mid-July. If it takes that long, depends on writing skills. And then after that, you start working on your college essays, your supplementals, and you just get through that. Applications open up August 1st. Doesn't mean that's when you need to actually start submitting. That simply means this is when you can enter the website and actually start filling things out. I actually don't ask students to send in their applications in August. I usually say wait until the school year starts, because you need to talk to your guidance counselor about opening up your Naviance account, which is how grades and teacher recommendations are submitted. You also want to, that's actually the major one. You want to talk to your guidance counselor so that your Naviance account can be opened up. And that way, if you also need to follow up with any teachers for your recommendations, then you have time when you can see them physically to follow up. Virtual tours, so a lot of students still finish out or continue looking at universities virtually, in person, and so on. One thing, as I mentioned about recommendations, so Barlow does a good job of this, although I don't think they did it last year. Don't quote me on that. Usually what happens, and this is what, even if you don't attend Barlow, what you should be doing is asking teachers for recommendations towards the end of junior year. If you want a recommendation that's not generic, something that doesn't simply say, oh, she was a pleasure to have in class, she's so curious and attentive, whatever else the generic is. If you want something that's personalized, give the teachers time, okay? You don't follow up with them once, ask them first in person. Hi, Mr. Kaminsky or Mr. Pinsky or whoever. Would you please be able to write me a recommendation? If they say yes, then follow up with an email. On the email, some teachers have a form they want you to fill out in advance, and some teachers just don't. So if they don't, then you simply say, thank you so much for agreeing to write me a letter of recommendation. I know you're busy and you have over 100 students, so I just wanted to give you a few points and reminders of events that have happened this year just to help you jog your memory. And you give 3 to 5 bullet points of just, I remember when I come in for extra help, or I joke around in class and we had this one time that this happened, but remember, I'm not a slacker. I'm not interrupting you when you're doing this, but we just have fun in class, or whatever it is that you want them to say, or just, again, help them jog their memory because they have 100 students, right? They're not going to remember all of these stories, especially not once you enter senior year and they have a whole fresh batch of students coming in. Then yes, they'll remember you, but they also have to learn these new personalities coming in. So give them the best chance you can to help you put your best application forward. And then you start following up around August, first week of August. You can send in your follow-up, just say, hi, I wanted to follow up about this, about my recommendation, and then go from there, right? And then after that, follow up maybe every 2 weeks if needed. Don't badger them every week because you started early enough that there's plenty of time to not get pushy. That's how recommendations work. All right, first semester, like I said, any retakes for SATs, ACTs that need to happen. After that, maintain your grades. Now, a lot of deadlines happen to be November 1st, November 15th, or January 1st, January 15th. That's independent. Every university made that decision for itself. But those are common deadlines, November 1st, November 15th, or January 1st, January 15th. Now, with that said, your midterm grades, your first semester grades are not going to be in yet. So you have to make sure your first quarter grades are sent in. And then once your midterm grades and semester grades are in, that you send in those grades as well. So you have to be on top of it when it comes to your transcripts. Other stuff, applications. So we'll talk about the different cycles, but honestly, we can just do that now. So when I said November 1st, November 15th are common deadlines, we have early action and we have early decision. I'm just going to jump slides to help with the visuals. So where's the time? There we go. So early action is not binding. Simply put, an early action is just an early deadline. One of the categories of demonstrated interest is if you apply early. Even if you didn't wait for this, even if you have only one deadline, let's say for UConn, as an example, the deadline's usually mid-December, December 12th, 13th, 14th, one of those dates, depending on which one is that Saturday that falls in. In that case, you could still send in a UConn application in November if you wanted to. And that shows interest as well. But there are also some universities who have actual early action deadlines. Simply means I was so interested in your university, I applied early. Because most students tend to procrastinate, and they wait for the last deadline they can, there's a smaller competition pool for this. And they still have, sometimes they'll get half the students that they need for that class from the early action and early decision pool, and then the other half from the other students. So you might have, let's say, 10,000 students who applied here and they have 1,500 seats to fill. Here you might have another 20,000 students who came in and they have another only 1,500 seats to fill, right? So early decision is binding. Early decision, you should only apply to one school. And when I say binding, you sign an electronic contract. So once you submit your application, parents, you also receive a link from the application that just says you agree to these terms and conditions, basically type out your name, put the date, hit submit. And you're saying that if accepted, I will forsake every other university to attend. You're not required to do any early decision. It's a common misconception that you have to. It's simply you should be able to afford the university. That's the only time that you want to do early decision. If finances are a question mark, then do not do early decision, just do early action, send in your application early, show interest in all the other ways that you can, but don't do the binding one. And early decision, this is how universities fill their quotas. So whenever we look at universities, we always see this is school spirit. Oh, there's a basketball team. There's a football team. Oh, they have the music ensemble, whatever they have, right? Well, the university has to make sure that stays available. So yeah, we have to get all our athletes in, and that's going to happen in early decision. Oh, we need maybe we have, oh, international students. Maybe we need that kind of diversity, and therefore we're going to pull the international students from here. Maybe it's, we need more women because last year we admitted 51% male and 49% female. So now we need to still balance out that ratio a little bit more. Maybe we don't have enough students from the Midwest, and we're a Florida university, so we need more people from the Midwest or from the West Coast. Okay, well, someone from Connecticut and a student from California may have the exact same profile down to the sports, down to the SAT score, everything, but they're going to admit the student from, let's say, Washington State, as opposed to the student from Connecticut, because they need that diversity, right? So all of these promises that they make of, okay, you're going to meet all of these different people, different mindsets, different experiences you could have on this campus. Well, yes, but now they have to actually pull the people who will be contributing to all of that as well. And that all happens in early decision. So you have those two. And then there's also something called rolling admissions. And rolling admissions means, simply put, that from, usually it happens August 15th. So August 15th to March 15th, if you apply anytime within that time frame, then you will find out within a month if you were accepted or not. So, but the application cycle is just ongoing. So you can apply anytime. We'll tell you within a month. Obviously, if you are genuinely interested in the university, apply early as possible when more seats are open. So going back to the timeline now, those deadlines for early action and early decision tend to be in November 1st, November 15th. Varies by university, but usually it's those two. And then some universities, because they still need more sort of the guaranteed tuition, aka the early decision, they will have a second early decision cycle. Early action, and that will be usually January. Now, for those two, for the most part, if you apply in November, you'll find out mid-December. So before the holiday break. If you end up in January for the early decision, early action, not the regular, those you'll find out mid-February. So it roughly takes them about a month to month and a half. Some universities are exceptions where they say, oh, instead of November, you apply in November, but instead of December, we'll tell you mid-January. American University does that. So it's rare, those exceptions. Mostly you'll know within the month frame. So those common approach that I have for my students, I have them all just apply in November 1st, November 15th, because if you're going to be finishing all your writing, unless you're waiting for an early decision or something to come through, just submit all your applications in November 1st, November 15th, so you can focus on your schoolwork or your sports or your projects or everything else that you still have to keep going, by the way, on top of all the writing stuff and college tours, etc. So I usually have them just submit everything by November. November 15th is my latest. And after that, they can relax and watch everyone else panic. Because most people tend to procrastinate on writing their college essays or everything else. Then interviews also tend to happen October, November, December, January. However, if you're going to have a January interview, chances are registration ended in December. So that's for anyone who has an optional interview. And we'll cover, there's a separate section on interviews, but just to lay that out, interviews also happen in that time frame. Continue with any college tours if you'd like. Some people do that over the holidays as well. You're not going to see much over the holidays. In fact, summer, just a college tour tip. If you're going to go in July, because what happens is summer semester part one, or summer vacation, starts usually end of April, beginning of May, depending on where the university is located. And then summer semester one. So if you're taking classes over the summer, maybe first week or second week of May to about end of June. However, fewer students tend to take the first semester classes. They want to take that month and a half off. However, if they then majority will start coming back July after the 4th of July holidays. And then they finish out until Labor Day break, basically, for their second semester. So because you'll have more students going in that time of the summer, that campus will be much more active. So that's going to be a more accurate representation of what life at that campus looks like. If you go May, June, you'll find the quiet. This is when You're not going to see many people walking around, just a couple of students going to and from class. There really won't be any activities. There's student organizations coming back. That's really mostly going to happen around the student organizations will happen in September, but you'll still have more festive or active energy in July. So summer, just that's a good time to do your college tours instead of earlier on. Okay, second semester. So really at this point after this, you're really just maintaining your grades because you still, whichever university you decide to go to, that university will want your final transcript. And unless you've just really messed up big time, it's okay if you happen to drop a little bit in your grades, but don't basically maintain it. Maintain everything that you can to the best of your abilities. And then May 1st is a National Commitment Day. So for parents, this means you pay the $500 deposit that is to secure your teenager's spot in the university. For teenagers, it basically means you're going to go on Instagram, TikTok, everywhere with your university hoodie to declare to the world where you're going to be next year. But that's May 1st. Send in final transcripts and you're good to go. And scholarships. Let's talk about that just a little bit on the timeline. You can apply for scholarships as early as freshman year of high school if you wanted to. There's no deadline or no limitation. There are thousands of scholarships available. I find most students just tend to be, they just don't want to write the essays that go with them. So it's more about not wanting to do the work than about the money that's available. You can apply any point. There are thousands available. And I'll show you the websites and everything on how to find the databases for the scholarships. You can also keep applying into your senior year, basically going into your college, start of college. Just make sure you're aware with scholarships. Sometimes, most times, they're one-time payments. Even when universities say, hey, we're offering you 16,000, make sure you know if that's per year, per semester, one-time payment, or what's going on. A lot of times students make the decisions, or families rather, it's not just the student, make the decision of, yeah, we're getting a discount. Yeah, and that was for 1 year. After that, you're probably paying the whatever price again, okay? So make sure you're aware of those labels. That's a common thing that happens, unfortunately. Okay, so that was the main timeline. Do we have any questions on that before just a quick SAT, ACT overview? All right. If there are no questions, I'm just going to keep going. But again, if you have questions, feel free to post in the chat at any point. And I will get back to it, even if it's something that we missed or we passed over. That's okay. Just post the question, and we'll still get to it. Okay. Quick snapshot of SAT, ACT. SAT, so they both have reading. It's basically read the passage, answer the questions. Note that the ACT is more of a time crunch exam. With that said, there's no one really waiting around for 15 minutes on this. Usually you're finishing with maybe 2 minutes left over, maximum 5 minutes left over for most students, unless reading is just your super strength but that's the rare kid. Most of us, we might have 2 minutes to spare. Here, rushing, rushing, because you have more questions than you have time. Math, there is a no calc section. In terms of topics, the highest this goes to is Algebra 2. If you read the official labels on College Board's website, they do say we include trigonometry. They do not include trigonometry. The trigonometry that's in SAT is the basic SOHCAHTOA that's usually covered at the end of geometry or the end of Algebra 2, depending on your teacher. But it's not something that's not actual trigonometry. Here it is actual trigonometry and actual pre-calculus. So you have to know your multiple topic surface level. You have to know. Here it's a little bit more on depth, but the SAT gets to you by twisting the stuff you already know. So you know how to do exponents, great, but they're going to find a way to present it in a way that you've never seen before. So they take concepts that normally in class, they're not related, and then they integrate them and say, here's the problem. Can you unravel what's coming up and can you unravel it in pieces to then answer the actual question? Sometimes when we say it's difficult, it's not or something is hard, it's not actually hard. It's simply that students miss it more. So difficulty level increases as your questions increase. but that doesn't mean it's a hard question. You get to question number 20. It doesn't mean it's the most difficult question on this entire test. No, 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 no. It simply means that we play with you and your emotions more to kind of ensure that you get it wrong. So that means we might give you a paragraph to read and it's the last question and we know that you're running low on time. And therefore you're probably going to skip it. You're going to make small mistakes along the way. We know how to intimidate you by wording things weird. So it's not just a knowledge based, it's emotion based. They know how to kick up the anxiety of students. To give you an idea, to make one SAT exam will cost College Board about $250,000. Okay, so there's some serious money invested in basically playing with the emotions and scores of an entire nation's juniors and international students. But keep that in mind, that when you see something as difficult, it doesn't actually mean it's difficult. It simply means you're more likely to get it wrong. Okay, then English, English is basic grammar. And just to note, I did see the question in the chat. I will just, we have a section for it. So we'll talk about college searches in a bit, probably in the next slide actually, or the next section. But to get just on this, English students mess up on this quite a lot because we have autocorrect now, we have spell check, Grammarly, all of this. So I've met students who couldn't spell, they just never had to, I guess. They didn't have to spell the word quickly correctly, or particularly was with a K. All of these different basic mistakes happen because now we're so dependent on a computer as opposed to our actual grammar knowledge. So this is an easy fix. It's just learning the 14 different rules that they want you to, and then just practice, 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 practice. So English is one of the easiest sections to improve upon. Science and history are embedded within, so that simply means there's no separate score. You're going to have reading, like science-based or history-based passages to read on the English and the reading, maybe some of those types, visual-based types on the math, which will count for your science. ACT has an actual science section. It's 40 questions. This is where students tend to eat it a lot. I mean, they don't do as well, but that's not because it's any background of science required. What happens is here, the visual-based questions were weaved in. Here, they just took all the visual-based questions and put them in one section. Can you read the charts, graphs, bar, whatever? And it's the funky visuals for both, but you have less time than you have questions, which basically means going back and forth and back and forth, back and forth, eats into your time. So students will say, I didn't get to a whole passage at the end, and that was a good 5 or 7 questions, but that tends to happen more. Total scores out of 1,600, national average is about a 1060. And then roughly with no essay, the time is actually, the test time is 3 hours, but if you include the breaks, it's 3 hours, 15 minutes. Same thing, but ACT is scored out of a 36. I don't know why they came up with these random numbers instead of just a flat out 0 ending, maybe like a 50 or 25 or a 10. I don't know, but they picked 36 and they picked 1,600. Either way. So then the average is about a 21. To give you a really, really quick idea of what a good score is, one, it depends on the university you want to go to. We're going to dive into that in a bit, but on how to find out what a university wants from you. But if you're looking at just NYU, or 1350 is always a good score. And if you want, let's say Harvard, Princeton, Yale, then you're looking at a 1450 and above for the SAT. ACT, a 26 and above or 27 and above is a good score. If you're thinking Harvard, Princeton, Yale, then a 32 and above is what you're looking for. Keep in mind that your test score is the most flexible part of your entire application because it took 3 years, maybe 3.5, if we're including senior year grades, to create your GPA. It took years to do your extracurricular activities, everything, sports, but it took 3 hours to take this test, right? And if you mess up the one time, you spend time preparing and you retake it, and you can change dramatically depending on the amount of time you spent on prepping. Okay. These are just upcoming test dates. Once again, they're included in the PDF that's going to go out after this, so you don't have to take the screenshots or anything. This is just for this year. Just keep in mind for March, this is not the date that you will have for the SAT because the state of Connecticut, like I said, it's an in-school exam, so you're probably going to be in it's going to be, I forgot to look up the date. I think it's about March 24th, 25th. That early 20s of March is usually, and it's a Wednesday. So if you find that Wednesday, early 20s of March. That's going to be the in-school test date. Okay, any questions so far before we dive into the university research? How many universities to apply to? What do we look for? How do we start? All of that. Let me just make a note of time. Okay. All right. So this is where I'm going to stop screen share for just a second. I'm going to share my desktop. We're going to go online because I want to show you everything as opposed to simply talking about it.
Can I ask a quick question instead of typing it in?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Given that you mentioned the SATs are changing in 2024, if I have sophomores right now that, graduate 2025, does it still make sense for them to take the SATs this summer before the junior year, that August date? Or how will that impact?
So one thing, and that is honestly a great question because I should have mentioned that point, which is even when tests change, universities still they still accept the previous exams. Usually up to 5 years previous. So all your test scores are valid for 5 years. Technically they're valid from SAT, ACT, like the company perspective, they're valid indefinitely for your entire life. However, from a university perspective, they want within 5 years. So if within 5 years you took the old SAT, then you took the old SAT. And to be very honest, I would probably take the old SAT simply because if you're planning to get tutoring or you're planning to even test prep material, the mock exams, everything, they've already been created. People already know how to address this. They know how to tutor this exam or teach this exam or find the resource, like the free exams available online. Everything is available. When you start fresh with this new exam, suddenly you're going to have test prep companies, everyone's scrambling to figure it out. So it's almost to your benefit to test in advance and let everyone else go through and be the guinea pigs, whereas you just finish testing it. Does that make sense?
Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so with that said, there's something else I'm going to show you. Okay, so 2 things. One, since we just talked about SAT and free resources, check this out. So first of all, if you want free prep, Khan Academy does free SAT prep. However, just keep in mind that Khan Academy covers, so I'm typing this into Google, so you will see what I basically will see. So it's usually the first thing that comes up when you type in SAT Khan Academy and you just create your account. At this point, every teenager knows what Khan Academy is. So it's just a matter of going to the SAT part as opposed to the algebra or whatever other subject you use it for. In this case, SAT, when they teach it to you, they're only covering core content stuff. They're not giving you the shortcuts. And you know what? That's okay too. But they're not giving you the strategies and tips and so on, but they're helping you with the foundation. So maybe you took geometry, it was a while ago, you need refreshers. Content review is amazing on this, and it's free. With that said, Khan Academy uses the same exams I'm about to show you, but if you didn't want to do Khan Academy, you just wanted to practice exams just to do your own diagnostic exam. So Google SAT test 1. Just typing that into Google. What happens is there are 10 exams like this. And from College Board, everything is available in PDF form. So this is a real exam that's going to pop up. It's going to load. It's like 60 pages. So, all right. So it's still loading. But this is going to basically be like a 64-page entire PDF of an actual SAT exam. And then when we go back, we'll find the answer key and you can score it yourself as well. So you'll know what you got out of the 1600 and you'll see what questions you might struggle with, what concepts you might struggle with. My internet is a little slow, which was a learning curve for a bit. But either way, so that's coming up and you can do this there are 10 exams available for free online. Feel free to use them. One other point I want to cover while we wait for this to load is what I didn't mention is PSATs. So PSATs happen basically every year in October. It's usually mid-October, the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, one of those dates. And they don't matter. Clarification. 9th grade, 10th grade PSATs don't matter. 11th grade PSATs could matter in that it's also called the National Merit NMSQT, National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, basically. And that means you can qualify if you have a near perfect score. So you're not guaranteed the scholarship, but you can qualify. Now, keep in mind, by then, if the PSAT happens by October, you'd have already spent time studying for the actual SAT. So your PSAT, you're already ready to take the PSAT, right? It will just be one more practice toward leading to the actual SAT, which is great. Now, if you're going to hire tutors or something for the actual PSAT, there's no need to, unless there's some reason that you need a PSAT score for. Maybe that's a summer program at a university, or whatever. But there is one of the other pieces of false advice that goes around is that you have to study for the PSAT, or that you should pay someone. You can study independently. I'm not saying don't do that. But if you're thinking of investing money, then don't do that. Not for the PSAT. That's not worth it unless you need your PSAT score for something. With test changes coming around, so for that 2024 batch that I was referring to, that batch, even if the test usually changes in March, the batch testing in October is still going to take the old PSAT. Okay, differences between the PSAT and SAT, it's roughly this. So 9th and 10th grade, what they do is they only include, let's say, the math content that most junior or most freshmen or most sophomores around the nation have covered. So freshman year, they're probably not going to include the algebra 2 component, right? But then sophomore year, they probably will include some algebra 2 concepts, but not everything that would be included in the actual SAT. And by junior year, it's going to be more like the SAT. However, it's just shorter. That's it. It's just the number of questions is shorter. PSAT scale, it's scored out of 1520, not out of 1600. So whatever score you get, just add an extra 80 points and you'll have a rough idea of what you would have gotten on the actual SAT. Because some students say, oh, but we only got a 900 or 960. And I'm like, yeah, but if you add an 80 points to that 960, well, now you're right in the smack center of what your normal average SAT score is, right? You're in the mid thousands. I don't feel like doing the math, so you see how I'm wavering around that number. Anyway, so going back to the SAT, so this is the actual SAT. It's loaded. It's exactly what the test would look like. You have your time, you have your passages. I highly recommend that students practice on the actual test, as opposed to just, it's not an online exam just yet. It will be in 2024. But for now, you need to get comfortable with how much margin space you have to work through this, to make your notes. You need to get comfortable with, especially for when it comes to the math section, you know that there's no extra paper given to you. So if you write really big, well, you're going to need to learn how to fit that into whatever space you have. So I usually have students, and if you don't want to print these out, which I honestly don't really recommend printing these out because that's a lot of papers to just keep track of. And more often than not, students tend to lose the packets because there's too many of them. There's a book from the Princeton Review called 10 Practice Tests. I should have just done, it came up. So what used to happen is up until a year and a half ago, College Board actually used to have these exams printed. So you could buy the blue College Board book that has everything ready to go. Then they stopped printing it, but it was always available on PDFs, but then they stopped printing it as well. So now we need something to help with the paper-based part, right? So I usually recommend the 10 practice tests from Princeton Review because they practically plagiarized College Board. And when I say plagiarized, I mean, there are some very, very, this is problem 1 here. It's problem 3 on test 1. So this is test 1 on College Board. Test 1 on Princeton Review will be this problem, different numbers, same concept, maybe an M instead of a K or something, and that'll be question number 3. This will be over here. This will be like, they shuffle things up, but that's about it. So those are just a couple of resources for SAT prep. ACT doesn't really have as many resources available, which is one of the reasons why as a tutor, I tend to lean more towards the SAT. It doesn't even have anything to do with being better prepared to tutor it, but there's just so much material I can have students prepare on. So I can have, oh, we're struggling with math. Okay, great. We have the 10 practice tests from online College Board, and we have the 10 from Princeton Review. On top of that, we have, that's already 20 exams right there, right? Usually from ACT, we get about 4 exams. 4 exams. We'll have about 4 exams, and that's in a book that you'd have to buy. And that's about it. So I can't drill you. I can't have you do hundreds of these certain kinds of problems and so on. to help you improve. All right, so that kind of is the spiel on SAT, ACT. Now with the college search. So with college search, just a couple points. Number one, most students tend to apply anywhere from 8 to 12 universities nationally. That doesn't mean that you have to and you're obligated to follow that same number. It really depends on the data. If you have GPAs and SAT, if you decide to send in your SAT scores and your SAT scores match the location, like whatever the university would prefer, then you're probably a stronger candidate, right? So maybe you have to apply to fewer universities and you don't need 12, maybe you're better with 8. But that's more of like a family decision. You'll have different counselors saying different things. Some say for reach, for safety, 4 or like 5 safe, like the 50-50 shot or something. I'm more of a look at your numbers and then aim maybe 10% above your reach schools. But I'm not going to say go crazy high if your numbers are not going to support you. Okay, so lots of categories to pick from. They only gave us 4 here to keep it limited to, but once you click on something, so let's say state territories, I'm just going to pick a few. Let's do Connecticut, because maybe you want just the Northeast. Well, you could pick out all the states from Northeast. I'm gonna miss a few along the way, but let's just get as many as possible. What are other big ones? Yeah, it's good. We have lots of universities there. That one has UNH, Vermont, and let's just call it. And yeah, let's just do that. Okay, continue. Show colleges. Now the other filters will pop up. So they'll have the list of colleges, and you'll have a couple thousand usually, or 100 in this case. This is a database of about 4,000. That doesn't mean they're all 4-year universities. Some are 2-year, some are international. So you can go ahead and pick your 4-year. Maybe you don't care. If you don't care about a certain topic, leave it blank. Otherwise, you may end up limiting it so much that no university pops up for you, even though there are universities like that. But maybe you know what you want to study. Maybe you don't. Maybe, and just keep in mind, let's say I do graphic design. And then I do early childhood education or whatever, or child development. What happens here is this reads as and. So the universities that come up will have graphic design programs and they will have child development programs available. Okay, it's not an or. So be careful how you go about picking some of these things. But then you can also do show colleges there and it will narrow it down for you. If you don't know what it is you want to do, that's okay. Pick everything that you do know. So what kind of a university do you want in terms of size? Maybe you have an idea. What kind of location do you want? And so on. This will be one of the ways you filter. Even when you filter, you might still be left with about 50 universities. Teenagers, this is where your work comes in because you're online. And parents, of course, help out, but just force them to do their own work.
Excuse me, Priyanka. Sorry,
Yes.
This is Tracy. Hi. So maybe this is just me, but I'm actually not seeing anything on your screen. If it's just me, that's fine. But I wanted to make sure it wasn't everyone else as well.
Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Okay, so maybe it was just me. Never mind then. I apologize for interrupting. It sounds like it was just me.
Oh, no. But can you see it now?
I cannot see as well.
Can everyone see now or not anymore either?
Yep, I see.
I see it.
It's bad?
No.
Okay.
I see it.
I see it.
Okay.
Okay.
right.
Sorry. I apologize
no,
for interrupting. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't.
No.
I'll follow up with you separately. It's okay, Priyanka. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm
I cannot see as well.
You cannot? Okay. It's screen shared, so it might be something on your end at that point.
Yeah, I think it might be right. If other people
yeah.
can see it, it's probably just something on my
On
connection.
your
So
end.
yep,
Yeah.
no problems.
Well, it
Okay.
took very long for me to be able to see. Now I cannot see anymore.
Oh, all right.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry to
No.
cause
No,
issues.
it's not your fault. Don't. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
no.
don't think it's
This
bad.
is
It's
something that's good to know. It's like when you see those TikTok videos, or I mean, maybe not, but just those videos of how the college professor gave a 20-minute or an hour-long lecture, and it turned out they were muted the whole time. I want to make sure
Yes.
that doesn't happen here.
That's why I wanted to check, but it sounds like
Yeah.
it's
It's like,
maybe
no,
just one or two of us. So you should probably keep
Okay.
going.
Okay, that's fine. But then in that case, I'll just make sure I'm saying everything that that way you know the websites and whatnot. So
Thank you. I
basically, we're on
appreciate it.
college boards, college search. That's literally all I entered into Google. College board, college search. we get their link for the college search, the entire website. From there, we pick the criteria, whatever we wanted, whatever we knew that, whatever preferences we knew we had. If we don't have some preference, then just leave that category blank. So that could be by location, that could be the type of university, public, private, or for special mission, for example, like a Christian university, or historically Black university, that kind of thing. You could pick by majors, by affordability, meaning does this university usually help out with financial aid? You can pick campus life stuff. So what size of campus do you want in the city, so on. Admissions category basically says, okay, how competitive of a university would you like? Some have a 10% acceptance rate, 10 to 25%, 25 to 50, and so on. Leave all the application deadlines and application type stuff blank. It doesn't matter. Most universities accept everything. That would be one of those useless criteria that you end up clicking, and then might turn out that the university hasn't checked that box for this particular website, and therefore it doesn't show up. So don't do that. Okay, now, and just so Tracy, were you able to see when I had the PowerPoint pulled up?
I can see it now. So,
Oh, okay,
maybe it was just from the
Perfect.
screen sharing before. So
got it.
thank you.
Okay. Just jumping back to the PowerPoint, which as a reminder, everyone will have the PDF for it. Couple of other websites that are useful. So College Board's College Search, first of all, is just it's a national website. Unfortunately, College Board has a huge monopoly in our entire education system. It's scary because it actually goes to some of the game played around the university admissions that we don't. When you take the PSAT, what happens is teenagers actually enter their information onto the Scantron. And when they enter their demographic information, so you have basically the average GPA you might put in, the demographics, so your ethnicity, what state are you from, etc. From that, College Board collects that information, and then they sell that information to universities. So when you end up bombarded with all the flyers, with all the emails and everything, that's all because College Board sold your information. And rough rate, I believe, is about 18 cents per student, or it used to be 18 cents and now it's about 40 cents per student. So it's roughly on that. And what happens, going back to that early decision cycle we talked about, where universities need to pull in the applicants. Well, what happens here is the university might say, shoot, we need more students from, let's say we're a university in Alabama, and we need more students from, let's say, the Arizona area. So they'll actually reach out to College Board and say, hey, we need basically batches of names from that particular region, or we need batches of names from this particular financial bracket, which even though you might not indicate your financial bracket on the PSAT form, yeah, but you name your name of the high school, right? I mean, Staples High School, there's a certain expectation we have. Joe Barlow, there's a certain Wilton, there's a certain image that just the name of the high school actually creates, right? So that's how they kind of filter in. Oh, we need more students who can pay for it out of pocket. All right, find the ones in Fairfield County, find the ones in West Palm Beach, find the ones in LA, in Orange County in California, so on. So they tailor it that way. So that's how they figure out the initial marketing. And if only it were so innocent. Then what they do is when we have all these national rankings are actually manipulated numbers. And I'm just going to go to this slide. There we go. Figured we might as well talk about it. So might as well have a fun slide for it. But anyway, so now where what it happens is national rankings. One of the reasons a university can be top tier is based on your acceptance rate. And your acceptance rate is determined by basically how many people applied and how many did you admit? Well, what if I could have more people applying? Even though I have the 3,000 seats, I'm going to have more people applying. I'm going to change the applicant pool from 10,000 students to 30,000 students. And that's exactly what happened around the mid-1990s, when basically university admissions went from being just educational institutions to now being major marketing departments too. Which is why a lot of parents will say, oh, when I went to such a student, it wasn't so competitive. No, it wasn't, because they used to have 50% acceptance rate. A lot of the Ivy Leagues used to have 50% acceptance rates. But then what happened is, well, now they'll say, okay, you know what? An example, let's say Harvard or Yale or whoever, they say, normally we accept like a 1450 SAT score. That makes us look good for our national rankings, that we have a good freshman class profile. We're showing competence. Cool. What they'll do is they'll buy data for students who are roughly in the 1350 range as well, because you're just close enough, right? So now you're increasing hopes. We're increasing your hopes and saying, hey, look, I'm reaching out to you, and you must now think that you're a serious candidate and we really want you. So you're going to apply. And now we're going to have more people applying. We still have the same 3,000 seats. We still had the same intention of the kind of students we wanted, with a few exceptions, depending on what, extracurriculars or life stage, whatever it might be, but very, very few exceptions. But now we changed that 10,000 people pool into a 30,000 people pool. And suddenly our acceptance rate went from a 30% back when we had 3,000 seats and 10,000 applications to now 10%, because we have 30,000 applications and 3,000 seats. And that's how they play the game. That's one of the major games of college admissions. But we don't, as consumers, we don't look at it that way. We're just like, dang, that must be based on the education they provide. Most times a university's job is basically to ensure that you don't mess up in that time frame. So all the Ivy Leagues, they do provide a good education, but so could another smaller university that just doesn't have as many resources, or it just doesn't have, even if it has resources in terms of academics, it doesn't have resources in terms of their marketing department, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, because I know there is that automatic tendency to look at national rankings just to say, hey, look, where do we stand? But just something to keep in mind, that those numbers are usually fudged. Okay. Other websites you can go on, campustourist.com is pretty nice in terms of just automatically taking you to the scheduling tour pages for all the universities. If you go on campus tour, you enter the name of the university, let's say American University or NYU or something, you'll just get the appropriate links for NYU campus tour scheduling, NYU, all the social media. Make sure you check out the social media stuff. To teenagers, this is again demonstrated interest. Follow them. Even if you follow them temporarily, it's okay. You can unfollow after you've been admitted or something, or after your admission cycle's over. Like a few things, interact, comment, like, all of that. Unigo College Reviews, teenagers, this one's for you. It's other teenagers or other college students who have written up pros and cons about the universities. And some of them, most of them, write legitimate paragraphs. I don't know if this is extra credit for something, but they write legitimate information. Oh, there's school spirit, professors or no school spirit, or professors are helpful or not so helpful, or expensive, the campus is actually too small, I thought it would be XYZ, etc. So you'll find the opinions of people your age there. They care about the same things you do. Is the food good? Is there stuff to do outside of school or in town, or whatever? You can navigate university websites, or you can simply type into Google University Virtual Campus Tour. I'm very hesitant to navigate university websites. I've found that's the fastest way to really get frustrated, because there's no uniformity. What could be under one label if for one university is under a different label for a different university is under a completely new label for a third university. So it's better just let Google do the searching for me. And that also includes any statistics I need to find. So admissions. So if another statistic would be admissions rate. So I would type in name of the university. Okay, so name of the university, then admission stats. And if you type in NYU admission stats or freshman class profile, you'll find the average SAT scores, average GPAs, average acceptance rate, and how many people applied usually, how many were accepted, actual numbers, not just the percentage. All of that information will be available. So that's how you can find out where your numbers stand compared to what the university would like. Keep in mind that universities will always have high, particularly with test optional, the numbers are now going higher and higher because only students with good scores are sending their information in, right? So what used to be maybe an average score of 1350, let's say for NYU, NYU's really bumped up and since COVID, so now it's more like a 1400, 1420, I think they bumped up. So that happens. All right, couple of key points. Make sure you it's never too early to start your college search. And when I say start your college search, in the next slide, I'll talk about what to look for, but even if you have like 50 as a list of 50, that's okay. I'm not saying, and do not go tour all 50 universities or something. The point is just have a starting point. All right. Then you can schedule campus tours and college tours. And when you hear them talking, you'll have an idea of, oh, wait, so-and-so university has this program. Does this one does too? We heard them talk about this. Or, oh, wait, why don't they? Da, 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 da. So you need something to start from, a comparison form or something as a base foundation. So you have a comparison, something you can compare to, right? And that only happens via exposure. So you can schedule upcoming just tours, virtual tours. Don't do physical campus tours until you figured out that university is actually worth your time and money to go visit. Create a list on Excel. One of the things I do in the email list, and I'll probably post it on Facebook now too, is just give you a free template that you can change it to whatever it is to suit you, but I've included some of the major points of things that you should always look at, including the cost. All right, so now the question is, what should you look at when you have a whole list of universities? You have 50 universities that College Board's College Search or your Naviance account narrowed down for you. Great, what now? Number one, look at the academics. So when we're looking at academics, that could be, hey, I have a rough idea of these 3 fields I might be interested in. Great, look at their course list. So the course catalog, are these actually classes that sound interesting to you? And yes, we're all going to be taking boring classes every now and then, but do the majority of them sound interesting to you? Or was graphic design, let's say, a concept that sounded great in theory, but not so great now that you're looking at the actual practical, right? Then after that, you look at the professors. Okay, so within these fields I happen to be interested in, what kind of careers have the professors had in these fields? Are they someone who is there someone in there who could serve as a mentor whose career is so interesting and it's something I want to try? Even if they're not mentors, someone I'd like to talk to and get advice from. And you're making a list, you're writing this down. You're not just saying, oh, this professor, I'm just gonna name drop in my essays. No. It serves twofold. One, yes, all of this information can come in handy when you have to do your why us essays or any kind of interview questions of what you're interested in, sure. But you're also creating your blueprint for when you if you decide to attend that university, because keep in mind that you're going to be applying your first semester of senior year, but most decisions are not going to come out until second semester. By then, you probably forgot everything or most things, or they got jumbled up between different universities. So organize it for yourself. And what will happen is you might end up finding programs when you're doing your research that other students will not have done the research for. So maybe there's a study abroad you're interested in, or maybe there's something you end up finding of interest. Like a common one is students who want to do pre-med. Universities that have their own pre-med programs, let's say Tufts, UConn, they usually have a speed track. So usually when you're a sophomore, you can apply directly into the medical school. Seats are very, very limited. And but if you do get accepted, you don't have to take the MCATs, you don't have to do anything. You're directly, and you save a year because instead of doing senior year, that's your first year of medical school. So you also end up saving time. Most students would not know that until they maybe walk into campus. If you know that ahead of time, then you now know who you need to reach out to, what kind of grades you need to have, what kind of classes you need to take, what looks good. You know how to put your best foot forward for something like that, right? So research, it has multiple benefits to it. So make sure you're writing down, and that's again on an Excel sheet, however you want to. So like I said, that's if you know roughly what you want to get into. If you don't know what it is you want to get into, remember that's also very common. Our education system is not designed to teach any teenager what kind of interests they have. And at that age, when we're 18, I mean, it's always the 10 jobs that we know about: doctors, nurses, lawyers. Most people cannot tell me what their parents do at work. That might have changed over COVID when everyone's working from home, but most students usually can't tell me what it is that their parents do because we never knew those jobs existed. So then the question is, how is this university, who I am paying a lot of money to, and this is a common problem, how are they going to help me figure out what it is that I like to do? Some it will happen through the Career Resource Center. And they'll say, okay, well, we want you to take this personality test. After you've taken the personality test and we've narrowed down a few fields, maybe, depending on how developed the Career Resource Center is, they'll help you schedule interviews with alumni who work in these certain fields that your personality test came up with. Maybe, and then you get to informational interviews. So you get to ask them about their jobs and so on. Or if it's not scheduling interviews with alumni, maybe they just say, hey, look, these companies, like, will help you reach out to them. Or we're not going to help you reach out to them, but we'll guide you. We'll still, like, some way, shape, or form. Maybe we're under-resourced. Maybe we'll still help you we'll guide you to them. Okay, great. Some universities, to solve this, how do I find out what I like question, they'll have an exploratory major. Some will, or an undecided major, and they say, we want you to take these certain classes, where these classes require, we have speakers coming in from different fields, and they talk about their jobs, and that's basically what it is. Whatever it may be, do your research to make sure there's a nice, robust way of figuring out what it is you would like doing. So you end up in an area of your interest, and you don't walk out with a degree that might not be of use. Speaking of degrees that might not be of use, if you decide to go the arts route and so on, I mean, no matter what it is you do, actually, be ready to go outside the box. You shouldn't just be doing the internships because everyone else is doing the internships. You shouldn't be looking for all this stuff just because everyone is during junior year. Start early. It's up to you. Universities, it's not like high school where they spoon feed you and say, hey, you missed your homework, or hey, there's this volunteer opportunity. No. In university, you make your own opportunities. You are, at that point, you're a legal adult, which means a lot of doors opened up for you in terms of programs, jobs, everything that you can do. It's on you to actually go find it. No one's going to tell you to go to the Career Resource Center. It's up to you to figure out where the heck that is on campus and what kind of services they provide. Right now, you look it up online, right? Then third point, no, Career Resource Center, actually, on top of helping you figure out what it is you want to do, great. You're gonna, now that I've been a full-time student most of my life and I'm transitioning to adulthood, well, what are you going to help me do to help get there? Resumes, most universities help you with. Cover letters, most universities help you with. But okay, great. Outside of that, like I said, you can, is there a program that's just for my field of people? So maybe for the arts, there's something for the medical, there's something for the business, and so on. And students help each other out too. Is it also, is there a database? Like our own job database, because some universities, especially the big ones like UConn, well, whoops, it's on timer. I can't seem to turn it off, but they have their own databases. So companies will go directly to universities for all these entry-level jobs or internships, and universities will post them just for their students. So do you have that? Do you have career fairs where, once again, companies come and they table, usually in the basketball courts and so on, in the gym, they basically table where they introduce their company. Some of them are accepting resumes. So you always walk in, dress business professional. Some are hiring on the spot for internships and such. So make sure you figure out what it is that your Career Resource Center does. Some will do mock interviews, and some will say, you can just watch the videos online about these. We have those available. So it's not the same. All right. And then, of course, you're there for academics. Make sure you know what support is available to you. Co-ops, most people don't know what co-ops is. So I want to point this out, especially for students who just don't like being in the classroom long term. This co-ops are basically, you take a semester off and you're working full-time in a field of your study. So you are not paying any tuition. What happens is you take a semester off and the university helps you find placement, and you're making a legitimate salary. And you're basically turning what you learned in theory last semester, let's say, into practice this semester, depending on the co-op you're in. Co-op programs, I highly recommend them for my kinesthetic learners. So the ones who really learn by doing, as opposed to sitting in a classroom and just visual and auditory. That's okay. Everyone has different learning styles. Now it's just important that we find a way to cater to whatever learning style is there. So kinesthetic learning, or rather co-ops, they work in different ways at different universities. For example, Purdue University says, hey, you just have to apply one time, and after your freshman year, every other semester, you will be doing a co-op, and it's automatically signed up. Delays graduation by a year, but that's no big deal because you've been earning while you've been working at the same, and which is also helpful for anyone struggling with financial aid, right? Or loans. And at the same time, you've been building your resume. A lot of students just get hired with the co-op that they were doing. So that's an option. Then you have University of Virginia, which has, oh, you do co-op, but whichever semester you want to do co-op, you just have to apply. So one application equals one co-op. One application equals one co-op. Purdue, one application equals like 5 co-ops as a part of their program. In Virginia, University of UVA, it's like, no. We're just going to do the one application per co-op. So every time you want to do a co-op, even if it's over the summer, you submit an application in advance, not last minute. And then, of course, you have universities like Drexel, which co-ops are just a mandatory part of their curriculum. So every student has to be working, basically every other semester they're working or they're in school, and it's a switch off. So you're learning at the same time as you're putting it into practice. Of course, study abroad programs and it's student life. So student organizations, intramural sports, or whatever you might be interested in, instrumental ensembles, etc. And of course, mental health is always good to look into. I've had quite a few students with anxiety, ADD, ADHD, depression, and so on. It's always good to know what your resources are before you actually need them. Just know you're paying quite a lot for your university education and the whole experience. So make sure you know what's available to you before you actually need it. You don't want, most people get the behind, the after the fact thing where they just simply have to say, shoot, I now know this program exists because the friend who went to that university is doing that, and I realize my university doesn't have it. You don't want to find out like that. Okay, this goes by really quickly. Thank you so much for your patience, for still staying on. Like I said, Sarah pointed out, this will be recorded, so I know we've gone over time. Just no obligation to stay on if you need to go. But just a quick thing on college essays supplementals. College essays, they're 250 words minimum, 650 maximum. And when I say maximum for any of this, you're quite literally copying and pasting into one of those text boxes, kind of like the boxes that you see when you do online surveys, the Google Forms or a SurveyMonkey or something like those types, except there's a word cut off. So if you have 651, that last word is not going to show up. It's gone. Topics include just any experiences you might have had, moments of personal growth. More recently, especially during COVID, another topic that's come up is, what are you grateful for? They tend to repeat roughly the same topics every year. They rarely, maybe every 2 years, they change one topic, but it's usually the same idea. There's always option number 7. So there are 7 topics you can pick from, and you just pick any one. There's no preference. There's no, oh, this one is more likely to be acceptable. No. You pick the one you can write about. Option 7 for your topic list is share an essay of your own choice. So that could be anything. I don't really recommend it unless you've run it by your English teacher and so on. But usually you'll have something to say for one of these major topics they ask you about. Supplementals, as we talked about, they're mini essays. Word count could be anywhere from 50 words, which really is a sentence, to 250 to 500, at 650 for rare cases, but usually it's more in the 250 range, 150 to 250 range. And they can ask you random questions. Why us? Which is one of the most common ones. Then they get creative, and creative, there's no right answer. They simply want to see how you think, because their whole point is they're trying to create a student body that is diverse, and you're trying to work out the mechanics of everyone's thought process, right? So to see if they'll get along, or maybe your thought process is just so different that you might end up being miserable at our university instead of actually enjoying the experience. And they don't want that to happen either. So if a question could be like, if you could solve a problem in your community or the world or something, what would it be and why? What are some of the other ones? So you can talk about an extracurricular activity. Some are, if you could be an object, what would it be and why? Or what's your favorite book? Why? Or the TV show or movie that you've seen, and so on. So they get all over the place. There's no consistency. All right, a couple of resources for college essay stuff. If you want to find the questions, just into Google Common App, you could just do essay. I honestly just type in college essay topics, but this also works. Samples. So one of the biggest things is we don't know what an essay is supposed to look like. I like Johns Hopkins essays that worked. A lot of universities do these essays that worked. I like Johns Hopkins because they provide the admissions committee's feedback, which is the most important part, because others just show you the essay and say, hey, this is it. But you can't figure out, some essays sound good, some you're like, oh, I don't get it. Even for the Johns Hopkins ones, I've had students read them and some of them are like, I don't like it. I don't get it. I would never have picked it. And that's all good. Now let's take a look at what the admissions committee had to say for it, right? And supplemental essay topics, you can just find them on the university's website. But like I said before, for for your particular application cycle, that will usually come out mid-July when universities update that information. So other than that, interviews. So not all universities require interviews. It can work in multiple ways. Some absolutely require them. So for example, Princeton will interview everyone. They'll have alumni who go out and just interview every teenager who applies, every student who applies. Some say no interviews unless we've moved you up a tier. So you've passed the first level and now we're serious about you. We're considering you seriously. And now interviews the next option. A lot of universities tend to have this whole optional thing. Which means most students are like, no, I don't have to do it. That's one less thing I have to do. I'm not going to do it. Do it. Okay, do it. So far, your entire application has been paper, 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 paper. Your personality is showing on paper, depending on your writing skills. So if possible, add a personality to it. All right, so formats, it could be in-person interviews at the universities, it could be alumni interviews, or it could be video on Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever. Questions, if they're bad interviewers, you will get the job interview equivalent questions. So tell me about yourself. These are the ones you want to prepare for. What are your academic strengths, weaknesses? What do you want from this university? Why do you like it? What do you want to do 10 years from now, etc. If they're good interviewers, it's going to feel like a natural conversation. You'll talk about your hobbies, what you've been up to, and just because they just want to know what your vibe is. That's really what it is. No one's going to know what you think you want to do in 10 years. Most adults don't know what they want to do in 10 years just because life changes. So no, this is bad interview questions, which roughly if a student is interviewing you, and that happens usually in-person interviews, if you have other older students who are interviewing you, they just, like at Fairfield University, for example, then they just pull from the list. But if a good interviewer is just going to say, oh, cool, what are your hobbies and so on. If that comes up and let's say you're an artist or you sketch or something, even though that was never a part of your application, make sure you take pictures. So like if you have an iPad or your phone or something, take photos of your work so you can share your work, right? So you can say, oh, look, I happen to have pictures. If you would like to see, give them the option. Don't just shove it in their face. I would have examples if you'd like to see, etc. All right, admission cycles we've already talked about. Once again, we have the timeline, and at this point, I hope it's just much more organized for you, and it's clearer. SAT subject test, ignore that part, please. They're completely banned, or they're just out. When COVID happened, they took them out. I thought I deleted that part. I did not. It's no longer relevant. So what do you do next? All right. College search, it takes time, so the earlier is better. If you go on vacation, or driving through, just drive through university campus. It doesn't matter if you never want to attend that university ever. But what's going to happen is you'll get a feel for what a university looks like in terms of sizes. So now teenagers will have a better idea of what a large university looks like as opposed to what is a small university. Oh, the campus just like disappeared. It was one road long and it was like on one street and disappeared. That's not what I want. Or maybe that is what you want. But drive around. And if you have time, park and walk around. Even if you don't plan to go there, if you just happen to be in the town, go get a feel for it. Because after a while, if you've seen like 4 large universities, and that's being very generous, really, if you've seen like 2, you've seen them all. If you've seen so many mid-sized universities, you've seen them all. Same thing. So just see them. Because they all do the same thing in terms of they'll do the same thing in terms of student activities, engagement, and so on. Because at the end of the day, you have a bunch of 18 to 22-year-olds that you are responsible for and have to entertain, right? And educate. Okay, take a practice SAT if you, and again, this can be done on Princeton Review's website. So if you just go on Princeton Review and you can sign up for a free exam. I already showed you the free exams that are online and showed you the books. I don't recommend buying the books or anything until you figure out which exam you want to take. Take the test that you do better on and you score higher on it. And at this point, you know what the averages are, you know what a good score is, all of this. So you have enough to know, you have enough to filter basically. And that's it. So thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions, please post in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself at this point, and ask on anything we've covered previously, or even something I haven't covered. But anyone who has to leave, I mean, no obligation to stay, but that's it. So you can find me on Facebook. That's probably the fastest, easiest way. You can also find me on my website, but I would recommend Facebook more because recently I've realized that most of our population spends time on Facebook, so I've just put direct energy in that direction. But yes, thank you so much for attending. Any questions you might have, I'd be happy to answer. Should you take the SAT or ACT is a question that depends on your strengths. If math is not a strength, I recommend skipping ACT. Even if honestly, take the SAT. Because speaking again as a tutor, there's just more material I can use to prep you. And that means other tutors also have more materials they can use to prep you with. ACT is very stingy in terms of the material, and it's not as popular. So they just haven't, I guess, put enough money in that development area. But I'd probably just say, to be on the safe side, regardless of your math background, you can just go ahead and take the SAT. And then if you want to show a math background or something, then take the AP math exam as opposed to ACT. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Have a
great
good night.
evening.